Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Why People Won't Do Business With You. My name is John Purvis from CCIQ and I'm your facilitator for today. Joining us is Chris Hodder from Nexus Innovation. Just some tips to get the most from today's session. We'll be online for approximately 40 minutes, and following the main presentation, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. Please send your questions through to Chris at any stage by using a text box on the screen. Following the session, we'll email all participants a copy of the presentation, a link, additional supporting information. So please check your inboxes later today. A buying decision is formed subconsciously by your customers long before a conscious buying decision is made. And quite often, you're the lost customer even before you had a chance to present your case on why they should do business with you. Research tells us that your customers are continually, subconsciously judging you and your business against 10 emotional perception criteria, or EPCs. Today, Chris is going to talk about how they use these to judge you against your competition, determine whom they will give their money to. Welcome, Chris, and over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me again. Sorry, I'm just looking for the actual slide deck on my screen. Sorry, everyone. It's just disappeared. Won't be a moment. There we go. Apologies for that. And thank you for attending, and really excited to be running my second webinar with CCIQ. Actually, first day back from holidays after 5 weeks in the US. So very most important question is to actually understand why more people aren't doing business with you or don't do business with you, as opposed to what I typically find with the number of organisations and people I work with is that they spend a lot of time focusing on how do we get in front of more customers, how do we have more conversations, how do we create more meetings, how do we drive more activity, etc., etc. But what they fundamentally don't understand is that when you drill down to it, in many cases, they can be making the same mistakes over and over and over again, or that people are making the same mistakes over and over again, and they're not actually understanding or recognising what's actually holding them back from being successful, and in many cases, just driving activity isn't sufficient enough to actually achieve the performance that you desire. A bit of a caveat in relation to the session today. This session isn't about educating you or training you in relation to improving your business. As a performance coach, my role is really working with clients on an ongoing basis to help them achieve those outcomes. If you haven't heard of the 70-20-10 rule, what it essentially tells you is that 10% of performance improvement occurs from attending educational sessions like this. 20% occurs from actually being coached or mentored, and 70% occurs from deliberately doing things or taking action or avoiding taking action in order to improve performance over a period of time. And what I typically find is that the biggest mistake is that many small business owners or again sales professionals like to educate themselves, but the reality is just educating yourself and not taking action or not having any form of accountability is fundamentally not enough to actually achieve the outcomes you deserve. So what I'm going to share with you today is, some of my observations and some high-level models, and bear in mind that this material would normally take a day or two to cover in great depth. So I'm going to cover off on a number of things and at a fairly rapid pace. So take some notes, and if you'd like to understand more about any of the concepts, please ask questions at the end. So moving on, and as John touched on, the first reason why, the first thing that's actually holding back many businesses from achieving the success they deserve is the lack of recognition that you're constantly being judged. Everything you do, every action you take, and I actually have a motto in that is that I fail every day, and I say that to clients, and I've run sessions before with bankers, for example, and you run into a room and the title of the session is I fail every day, and people get upset about it because they like to focus more on what's working for them and the things they're achieving, and unfortunately, that's not really where you want to be playing. You need to recognise is that you do make mistakes. You are being judged. give you an example, in many cases people don't understand, how they're being judged or what they're being judged on. And I had a friend over from the US recently, and she asked to meet me for breakfast somewhere, and I live in Surfers Paradise on the Gold Coast, and so I walked down to the beach to meet her, and we were walking past a cafe, and she wanted to go into a particular cafe, and I said, no, I don't want to go in there. The one I go to is over here. And she asked me, well, why don't you want to go there? And I had to stop and think. I've been living in Surfers Paradise for nearly 2 years, walking past that cafe every day, and I'd never even really noticed it. I'd never even thought once about going into there to eat, and it really puzzled me. And what it really comes down to is that we're all making subconscious judgment perceptions about businesses, whether it be look and feel, the type of clientele that are in there. There's a whole range of things which I'll cover off on, but the reality is I was subconsciously choosing not to go there, and I was doing it over and over and over and over again. Another example I really want to give you is, from a business perspective, and my dad would kill me if he ever heard me tell this story, but he worked for Bunnings for a number of years when he was semi-retired on the Gold Coast, and hopefully nobody on this call knows him. But I picked up my son one day, and I decided to go and pay him a surprise visit, and I walked into Bunnings, and I was standing at the end of the aisle with Cooper, and he was only about 7 or 8 at the time. And I said, look, there's Poppy down there. He's just on the corner there serving some people. And he was standing there with a can of Coke in his hand and showing people some plumbing supplies. He's a plumber by trade. And I could hear him talking. He's going, this is the material that you need. And they're going, oh, okay, no worries. And they're looking at him. He was very casual and laid back. And he said, as they were about to purchase, he said, look, you just go down the front there and pay for it. And they said, oh, look, do you know anyone that we could use to install this? No, my father said, have you got anyone that can install this for you? And they looked at him and said, oh, do you know anyone? And he said, yeah, me. And he proceeded to exchange details, and they walked off, and he saw some other customers down the aisle, and he proceeded to quickly turn around and walk the other way with his can of Coke. So, and look, the moral of that story, he was semi-engaged as an employee. He was avoiding actually serving other people, but the reality is the guys at Bunnings thought he was the best employee in the world. They absolutely loved him. When he actually decided to retire, they were saying, you sure you don't want to come back and do some more hours? But the reality of the fact was he was probably not exactly one of the most motivated staff on the floor, but the leadership or the sales leaders or the team leaders or the customer service leaders had absolutely no idea that he wasn't 100% engaged. In fact, he was probably about 50% engaged. So my question is, do you really and truly understand how your people are engaging with your customers, what they're saying, what they're doing, the actions they're taking, and how much time do you spend actually observing and understanding what's actually really going on and seeking feedback from your customers? From my father's perspective, he's obviously an amazing father and a great person, and all the employees loved him, but he wasn't truly engaged, and nobody really understood that, and they didn't want him to go. So you need to understand you are constantly being judged. How much do you understand about what your customers think about you? Do you actually ask them the question? And more importantly, when you lose customers, do you take the time to deliberately ask them why they chose not to do business with you? In many cases, when you get customers, you might ask them why they chose you, but it's actually more important to understand why people are chosen not to do business with you, so that you actually take some action and do something about it. So moving on from that, bearing in mind that you are constantly being judged, there's a significant amount of research out there around these subconscious judgments or perceptions that people are making on you, and it's almost like you can map out your business the way that you map out, if anyone's ever done a DISC profile or any sort of profiling document around you as a person or as a salesperson or as a leader, you can do a similar sort of process with your business. And what the research shows is that there are 4 key areas that people are judging you around, and that's first and foremost your image and ambience, secondly your style and process, thirdly your products and services, and lastly your customer service. And within each of those areas there's a subcategories of about 10 in each area that you could actually specifically look at and say, how do we believe we are going against each of those judgment perceptions, and then you could actually ask your customers how they rate you against those and see where the gaps are. And typically there will be gaps across different areas within your business that you, in many cases, believe that you're strong at, but from a customer perspective, you're not as strong at. So Now, this is way too much to be covering off today in any form of detail, but if anyone wants to understand more about it post the session, you're more than welcome to reach out to me and I can take you through it in a bit more detail. But the main thing is recognizing that you're being judged. And having your head in the sand and not understanding or taking the time to understand how people perceive you is going to cause you issues within your business. So what I really want to focus on now is typically when I see outcomes of this sort of analysis or understanding a business, the starting point for me is not necessarily looking at the business as a whole, but the starting point is recognizing what I see are the critical areas that are holding you back from achieving the success you deserve. And the first one is that as business owners or business leaders or sales leaders, the number one thing that holds you back or holds your business back is a culture of people being more concerned with how good they are and not how fast they are learning and growing. And the reality is that any business, any organisation, there are two roles that people play. The first role is your job description, and unfortunately, the second role that people play is hiding inadequacies, only putting their best selves forward. When somebody asks them a question, how are things going, they are too scared to admit that they lack confidence in doing something or they've made mistakes, which comes back to that concept of we fail every day. So when you think about your business or think about you, in many cases, business owners, you are the reason that your business isn't achieving the success that you deserve. When I sit down with a business owner and I ask them how business is going and what they're looking at improving, it's amazing how many of them, all they talk about is the good stuff. They talk about what they're achieving, what results they're getting, or they're saying, look, we're not getting the results we deserve. If only my people could do this, or if only my people could do that, if only I could get the right staff, if only I could hold on to them. But the reality is the number one person that's holding you back is you, because there are things that you as an individual could fundamentally change tomorrow that would improve the needle on your performance. And nobody is exempt from that, myself included. You could sit down and say, if I could change 3 behaviours personally that would change the outcomes for my business, every single person on this webinar would be able to come up with 3 things that you know you're not doing, avoiding doing, don't like doing, and then in reality, many of those things that you avoid doing or lack confidence doing are the things that make you money. And that might be holding people accountable, it might be having some visibility, it might be reporting, it might be having difficult conversations, it might be actually observing people and taking the time to provide some coaching and mentoring and support, it might be onboarding people. But the reality is there will always be a minimum of 3 things that you could change tomorrow personally that would fundamentally change the game in relation to your business. So if you find yourself pointing to external factors as holding you back from achieving the success you deserve, then that's the biggest mistake you can be making. The first place is to look at yourself. That actually then flows on to a concept of around attitude versus environment. The reality is that most organisations or people I talk to, they go, look, I hire, you know, attitude is the most important factor in the people that I hire. I hire an attitude and I can teach them the skills, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is the most significant impact on performance, and as a leader, is that a manager manages people and manages tasks. A leader manages the environment to enable their people to be successful. So you need to ask yourself, you know, extending on from you know, that the whole, am I more concerned with how good I am? What is it that you are doing within your business that is enabling people to be successful or achieve the success they deserve? But more importantly, what is it you're not doing with your business? You know, if I was to walk into your business and ask somebody, tell me about the culture here, tell me about the environment, how do things operate? You could have a very strong environment that is negative. And when I say negative environment, that means that there is a lack of accountability, visibility, mentoring, coaching, reporting, you know, fierce conversations, whatever it might be. That's a negative environment because there is no structure, there is a lack of accountability, and which enables people to be successful. A very positive environment could be one that you've actually got a very clear operating rhythm, expectations, business development plan, you know, coaching, mentoring, observation, etc., and that's going to actually enable people to be successful. The worst thing you can do is have an environment that lacks follow-through, authority, accountability, visibility, because that actually holds you back from achieving the outcomes that you deserve to achieve. If you have somebody with a fantastic attitude that comes into a weak environment or a negative environment, they won't last. and they will never last. So, so going back, looking at yourself, what am I doing, or what could I be, or what do I need to start doing in my business to enable me to be more successful? And what is the environment like in my business? Is it an environment that's conducive to people being successful, or is it an environment that is very weak and lax and no accountability, no visibility, etc.? That's holding you back as well, and that again falls on your lap, not on the lap of your people or your staff or your customers or your suppliers, etc. Flowing on from that is, and I came up with this saying a number of years ago, is that customers are like wild animals; they can smell fear. So, when you're not very good, or your people aren't very good at providing a compelling, positioning your business in a compelling way, asking for business, following through with pipelines, a whole range of different things, or referring or asking for referrals, a whole range of things. When you lack the confidence in the way that you speak, customers can smell it. They can smell when something's when you lack the confidence, when you are unsure about what you're talking about, you lack authority, all of those sorts of things, and it actually holds you back. I work with a number of financial institutions. I work with small business, a range of things, and they say, well, how do I compete in the marketplace? How do I provide products and services that are different? Let me tell you now, what makes you different, in the biggest impact that makes you different with your customers is the way that you talk about the business, the way you position yourself, the way you come across as an authority figure, the way that you articulate why people do business with you and what they're missing out on, the problems you're solving as opposed to the products you're selling. That is the biggest way that you can differentiate yourself against your competitors, is how you are perceived by your customers. And the way that you speak is a big part of that. So I look at any business and say there are 4 things that, whether it be your salespeople or as a business owner, that differentiates successful people from less successful people. I call it, Alta Performance. Use this Alta methodology. A stands for activity. So, what is your business development plan? How are you actually managing your business? What is your operating rhythm? Does your activity actually match against the business development plan that you have and where you want your business to come from? In many cases, businesses will focus on activity. We're not getting the results we want. We just need more activity, drive more activity, make more calls, go and see more people, talk to more customers. But again, as I started out, if you're not saying the right thing at the right time or in the right way, recognizing that selling as a process, service as a process, that could be holding you back. So that which flows onto the next one around the language you use. How do you be more persuasive? How do you be more deliberate? What words physically comes out of your mouth? I hear people on the phone, and the language and then the timing of how they say things or do things changes the game. And I've had clients say to me, Chris, could you give us some help with dealing with angry or abusive or abrupt or evasive customers on the phone? And I've had examples where I turn around and say, well, look, give me some recordings of the first 60 seconds of the call that you're making, because in many cases, and in one particular case I can think of, which was an investment bank in Sydney, was that they were setting up the call wrong. So the language they were using, how they were speaking, clients were confused about who they were talking to, where they were from, and that was causing them to be abusive and abrupt and evasive, which set them up for a really poor experience over the phone. So I was more focused around how do you actually time what you're saying and how you're saying it to avoid people getting angry and to give yourself a better chance of getting the outcome that you deserve. So activity, language, and timing, but the last one is around emotional reality. So you could be doing the right activities, you could be given a script and you know when to say things, but if you don't believe in what you're saying or you lack confidence in what you're saying, customers can smell it, and it doesn't execute well. And the classic example is a number of call centers, and I work with a couple where you give somebody a script and they know exactly what to say and when to say it, but they don't believe in what they're saying, and that comes through across the phone. And we all hate receiving calls from call centers that are heavily scripted and people are just going through the motions and they're not even listening to you. So how you feel about it, your confidence, your optimism, if you feel that it's going to be an unsuccessful call, that's going to impact on the way that you execute it. Doesn't matter whether you've got the right words and the right timing or not. So understanding and giving people a confidence around what they're saying, but more importantly, having the confidence to have the right conversations with the right people, not avoiding the activities that deliver results. And And that emotional reality piece is a critical part when you're sitting down and saying, well, what are the behaviours, or what are the activities, or what are the things that I'm not doing that's holding me back from achieving the success I deserve? In many cases, those activities or behaviours or conversations are usually the ones that you either you lack confidence doing, or you don't like doing, or you don't feel comfortable doing. So a big part of improving performance is actually acknowledging within your business that I lack confidence, or I'm not in an emotional state where I really want to tackle this conversation or these activities, whatever it might be, and that's where you need to actually ask someone to give you help, or what would you do in this situation? How would you approach it? And whether you be in a small community or whether you be in a large city, I've had examples in Western communities where I've said to people, get together and form boards of advice. When you have trusted networks, get together on a regular basis. There is more knowledge and information, experience and resources across the people that you work with, the people that you trust, your family, that you can ask for advice on. I can guarantee if you ask for advice, say, look, I really lack confidence doing this, I don't know how to solve this problem, people will give you answers. They will give you advice and they'll give you suggestions. The worst thing you can do is actually avoid it or do nothing about it at all, knowing that it's holding you back from achieving what you need to achieve in your business. So that's a few things really there that really focuses on you as a business owner, and just having a deliberate understanding of those things and actually sitting down and saying, well, where am I making mistakes here and what could I be doing differently can have a massive impact on your business. If we then look at from an activity perspective, when we look at the Ultimate methodology, the first thing is, for me, is that, what is your business development plan? It's amazing the number of people that I talk to that have a business plan, or they have a strategy document, or they have a strategy on a page and all that sort of stuff, but they don't actually have a deliberate business development plan. And in fact, in many cases, they're spending more time on the hardest way to get business and less time on the easiest way to get business. And I've got a triangle diagram there. It's not the Illuminati, but at the very top of the triangle, in the first section, the easiest way to generate business development is to look at what am I deliberately doing to generate new or different revenue. Sorry, the first thing is, how do I retain my customers? What is my deliberate strategy to retain my customers? It is far easier to retain customers than it is to actually get on new customers. So many people don't have a deliberate retention strategy around how I look after my customer, what I do about it. And attached to that is, how do I upsell, which is cross-sell and upsell. What am I doing differently or more with my existing clients when I catch up with them, and do I actually understand what my clients have with me and what they don't have with me? Businesses that do reviews, for example, around advice, they don't have a deliberate strategy around what should we be doing more with them and how often. The next layer down is actually asking for referrals. Very few businesses deliberately ask for referrals. They receive referrals, but they don't ask for referrals. And there are dozens of ways of asking for referrals, all the way from indirect through to very direct ways of asking referrals, but they don't deliberately ask them. Referrals are 4 times more likely to close than any other form of business, yet we don't have a strategy around asking for referrals. The next layer down is around how you partner. How do you have internal partnerships and external partnerships? So many people say to me, centers of influence or partnerships don't work. And the reason they don't work is, if you think about the number of times you've gone to somebody, hey, you should refer me business and I'll refer you business. You have a happy chat over a coffee, there's an absolute desire and intent to do business together, but then you go away and nothing happens. And if you think about the customers like wild animals and they smell fear, if you can't, in a compelling way, position your value to a potential client, how do you think a third party is going to do it when you're not in the room? How do they position you when you're not there? How do they promote you within their business? How do you pair with them so that you're part of what they do or the problems they solve, as opposed to a different referral? Because I'll sit there and I'll say, oh, look, who's looking after this business for you? And the client goes, oh, it's all sorted. They get rejected, therefore they lack confidence in doing it again, and then when you catch up with them a month later and say, hey, look, how are you going with referrals? They go, oh yeah, look, nobody's really interested at the moment. I've asked a few people, so the intent, desire is still there, they just don't know how to do it. And the last one is around prospecting. It's the hardest way to drive new business. Networking, social, cold calling, going out and seeing people, hardest way to get new business. But unfortunately, most businesses I talk to, that's their core strategy. It's how do I use social media? How do I get out there and pound the pavement? How do I make calls, etc.? So there is an absolute hierarchy in business development. You need a plan around that hierarchy, and then you need to understand what's going on in your business. You need to have a pipeline. You need to understand. You have management information systems that tell you what's happening. What clients are coming, or a reflection against your business development plan, and a lot of people avoid having a pipeline report or who's in the mix because they feel like it's something that's an administrative chore. Let me tell you now, if you're selling something, your most important management tool as a sales professional is your pipeline report. It's not something that's being done to you. It's actually something that you need to be doing and you need to be delivering on. The American Sales Association showed through research that the top year-on-year revenue-earning companies, the sales professionals or business owners spent more than 60 minutes a week discussing their pipeline. And that's not from a forecasting perspective, it's from a health perspective. How healthy is your pipeline? Have we got the right mix of business in? How long is it taking you to get through, et cetera, et cetera. And the last one is around opportunity coaching. And we're looking at individual clients and transactions, understanding what's being said, what's holding them back, why they didn't go ahead, what's stalling and moving forward, and having a deliberate focus on health and opportunity coaching within the pipeline. I want to talk about the concept of the pressure cooker, and the reason why opportunity coaching and pipeline reporting is critically important, and having a business development plan is you need to start doing things different. You need to understand what you're doing in your business, what's working in your business, what you need to change in your business. But with the absence of accountability and with the absence of somebody following through with you, you're very rarely likely to change behaviour because, as human beings, we don't like change. And there's a concept, where in order for you to change, you need to be put in a pressure cooker. If I'm cooking a side of lamb, a lamb shoulder, and I put it in the pressure cooker and I keep opening it every 10 minutes to see how it's going and letting the steam go, it's going to take hours and hours and hours to cook. The reason why the lamb cooks so quickly and changes so quickly is that you're applying consistent and constant pressure, which means it actually changes very, very rapidly. The same thing applies within your business. It applies with you as a business owner and applies to your people. You need to actually apply pressure, and that pressure usually comes from things like accountability, follow-through, follow-up. Sorry if I'm flying through this, but I'm being given the wind-up that we've got about 7 or 8 minutes to go. So the last things I really want to focus on around is, recognise that typically you're holding your business back. I'm sorry to say that you need to create an environment that's conducive to success. That you need to understand what's working and what's not working within your activity, language, timing, and emotional reality within your business, and that comes down to things even like optimism, pessimism, how you attach meaning to things that are working and not working. But the big thing that makes a difference is understanding how human beings make decisions. And how do they attach meaning to actually doing business with you or not? Now, I could spend hours on this, but essentially I call it the gain-pain matrix. And the reality is that as human beings, we suffer from a concept called status quo bias, and we are biased to keep things the way they are, even when the opportunity for us moving forward to change means it's going to be more beneficial, or the risk to us diminishes by changing. We're biased to keep things the way they are, which is why so many people say, I had the best proposal, the best offer, and I can't believe they didn't go ahead. The reality is there's a whole bunch of psychology at play there. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm very fascinated by these concepts. So the reality is that many people are taught to sell a position based on achieving an outcome, saving money, making money, all of these sorts of things. But the reality is 80% of human decision making is around avoiding consequences or loss, not approaching a gain or an upside. So are you more focused on selling products or selling an upside or selling a dream, or where you should be more focused on what are the problems you're solving, what are the consequences of not doing business with you, what are they missing out on each day, each month, each year as a result of not doing business with you? If I'm walking down Queen Street, and it's peak hour traffic on a Friday afternoon, commuters everywhere, and I see a $50 note in the middle of the street, I may think about running out in the middle of the street and acquiring that $50 note. But if that $50 note falls out of my pocket, I'll do everything humanly possible to get it back. And if somebody else picks it up before me, I'll hunt them down, grab them on the shoulder and say, that was my $50 note, I'd like it back. We are more motivated to take action to avoid a consequence or a loss than we are to take action to approach an upside or a gain. The problem with this as well, so gain, pain, issues and effort, is that if people don't see there's an issue with their current behaviour or their current buying patterns or the way they're currently doing business, they are more likely to see that there's too much effort involved or uncertainty to actually do business with you. So you need to play in these 4 quadrants. You need to help them understand that there are significant issues, or admit to the fact there are issues with the way they are doing things, that there is consequences or pain as a result of not changing their behaviour. You need to minimise the effort or uncertainty in them doing business with you, and things like testimonials and, you know, helping them to contract around this is how things are going to happen, this is what I've done it before, etc. Minimise the perceived effort or uncertainty, and then show them the upside. But more importantly, get them to make a conscious decision between I want to avoid these consequences of not changing my behaviour and getting out of my comfort zone, or I need to approach the gain or upside of change. So I'm just going to wrap that now on the power of language, and if you haven't done a lot of research around this, I highly encourage you to read a book by the name of Robert Cialdini on Influence of Psychology of Persuasion. And what he tells us is that just like the animal kingdom, human beings respond to click-where response patterns. So we see a certain colour, we hear a certain sound, we respond a certain way. So if you are just saying the same things that everybody else is saying in the same way all the time, people hear it as white noise. I'll give you a really good example. I go into a retail store and somebody says, "Oh, can I help you?" My instant response is, "No, thanks, I'm just browsing," whether I'm in there to look for something or not. We hear certain patterns, we hear certain sounds, we see certain patterns, we respond a certain way. So a big way of differentiating yourself is understanding that language can be powerful. So without actually going through any of these in great detail, you can look up Dr. Google, jump on and look up Weapons of Influence, Robert Cialdini, and there'll be some great reading about it. The important thing about language is that when you hear somebody speaking to a client or a customer, there are psychological principles that you can attach meaning to what they're saying when you're observing and saying, well, when you say this, you're going to be less persuasive or less influential because of these reasons. The first one is liking. So people are more likely to do business with people that they like. Now, I know that's a no-brainer, but importantly, it's actually easier to get somebody to dislike you than it is to get somebody to like you. So what are you saying, or the way, how are you saying things, how are you structuring things, what are you doing that is potentially annoying people or getting them to dislike you, which means you're significantly less likely to get them on board, arguing with them, lacking structure in the way that you deal with them, not following through, a whole range of different things. What is really getting to your customers, or how are you, what's that initial experience when they walk in the door that means they dislike you or don't like you from the moment they walk in, prevents them from doing business with you, but they're more likely to do business with what they like. Authority, are you an authority figure? Do you have access to information that makes you an authority figure? How do you leverage authority? People, again, are more likely to do business with somebody that's an authority figure, within the marketplace. Authority can also mean the way that you conduct yourself. If you conduct yourself as a person with authority, going back to customers are like wild animals, they can smell fear. If you lack confidence in the way that you speak, you lack authority, you lack credibility. You need to have, the liking is the rapport piece, the credibility is the authority piece. So what makes you credible, and how do you come across as a credible authority figure, and how do you leverage authority? Commitment and consistency. People are more likely to follow through when they make a commitment to something. So inconsistency is an undesirable human trait. So if you can get your customers to commit to the fact that there was a problem or an issue as a result of not doing business with you, they are far more likely to follow through and do business with you. So commitment build is incredibly important. Asking questions that provoke issues, not asking factual questions. So asking a question that gets a customer to say, you know what, there is a problem. I'm not achieving this. I recognise that I'm losing money here, and you're getting them to commit to the fact that you can help solve that problem as opposed to sell them a product. Reciprocity. So I've got a couple of minutes left. So reciprocity is really the concept of favours. So if I do something for you, you're more likely to do something for me. If I go to the pub on a Friday afternoon with some clients and I've only got time for one beer, I'm less likely to let them buy me one, because there's a sense of obligation to give them one back. So reciprocity is an incredibly powerful concept when you use it effectively within a business environment. So doing favours for your customers. A really quick example, I've had a customer that wasn't returning my calls a few years ago, so I sent him a book on a topic that was really important for his team, and I said, John, handwritten note, express post envelope, the last time we caught up you were talking about your team really wanting to do more in this area. This is a great book, it's really worthwhile reading. You should, look forward to hearing back from you soon. Express post envelope, he returned my call the next day because I did him a favour, I sent him a book. So you can be doing favours for customers within your business. How are you leveraging favours to create a sense of obligation that they want to stay with you? The last couple, social proof. Social proof goes back to, the old tutor times when they had live plays, etc. in England, and they would advertise for people with infectious laughter, and they would go to the live theatre, and the more infectious laughter they had, the more money they commanded, because it made the show funnier, which is where canned laughter and live studio audiences come from now. If you were to listen to an episode of Seinfeld and there was no laughter whatsoever, you would find it less funny. So social proof tells us that if somebody else thinks it's funny, I'm going to think it's funny as well. If somebody else is achieving these sorts of results that look like me, then I'm more likely to actually do something like them. So people like me are achieving certain outcomes, or you're solving certain problems for. So how do you actually leverage social proof? And testimonials, references, etc. are a really good example of that. And the last one is around scarcity. So the more scarce an asset is, the more valuable it becomes. So what's scarce about your business? The first thing is, and I touched on this earlier, the way you position yourself, the way that you deal with your customers. It's very, very difficult for people to replicate how you do things or why people do it. So that's a starting point. That's a big differentiating factor, is the way you go about working with your customers. The next part is around what makes you unique compared to your competitors. And are you truly leveraging that, or are you just same? Do you talk about your business the way everybody else talks about their business? Do your customers hear the same words, the same phrases that they hear when they're dealing with a competitor? What makes you unique, i.e. nobody else does it, delivers it, provides it, executes it in a certain way, the way that you do, but what makes you different, and how do you actually leverage that in the way that you speak to your customers? So recognizing the power of understanding how people make decisions and attach meaning from a gain and a pain perspective, then understanding that the way that you talk, the language that you use, there are psychological principles that you can attach meaning to. The way you speak to your customers, the way that you deal with people, the way that you follow through, can make you more persuasive or less persuasive, more influential, less influential, and give you a better chance of achieving the outcomes that you deserve within your business. If you don't know how your people speak to your customers, then you are missing out on opportunities, because you are missing out on the opportunity to help them to be more effective in the language that they use and the way they go about using it. If you haven't taken the time to sit down and reflect around how you work with your customers, again, you're missing out on opportunities and eventually preventing people from actually wanting to do business with you. So in wrapping up, again, sorry guys, this is a day or two workshop in itself, and I just wanted to challenge the way you think about your business. But the starting point is to think about what's holding you back. Let's get back to the 70-20-10. 10% of performance improvement, within your business is attending sessions like this or attending workshops. 20% is getting somebody to hold you accountable. You committing to things, doing things differently, and having an essence of accountability, coaching, mentoring, etc. But the 70% piece is the critical bit. You need to start doing things differently. Recognize what's holding you back. Commit to the fact that if you change some behaviors tomorrow, the stuff that you're avoiding doing, you lack confidence doing, you're not comfortable doing, and asking for someone to help you in that, and starting to do things differently, put yourself under pressure, take yourself outside of your comfort zone, that's where you're going to get the most improvement. Not focusing on what your staff need to do, but focusing on what you need to do around your attitude, your culture, a whole range of different things. So I think I'm right on time now, and I'm more than happy to elaborate on any of those points. It's been a very quick fire session, but please ask some questions.
Thanks, Chris. It's time to ask questions, so please feel free to ask the questions now. Chris will ask time for about 2 or 3 questions, Chris. We've got the first question here from Trevor. He's actually stepped right back to the beginning of the presentation and asked for key tools, some of the key tools to ask customers how they perceive you.
How they
can. Yep.
Yeah, look, the classic one is actually asking for feedback from your customers. My biggest thing is having an understanding of who you're engaging with as a starting point. So many customers I deal with don't track their pipeline. They don't know who they've actually had inquiries from, who they've started to engage, and that they've fallen off the radar. So the key tool for me is starting to track and monitor and manage who's making inquiries with you, how you're engaging with them, where they're dropping off the radar, and then starting to understand why they're dropping off the radar, why they aren't proceeding, and what's going on. So I think you can do your customer surveys and those sorts of things with existing customers. I would be more focused on tracking what's going on from a prospect perspective, and who's not proceeding through the pipeline and who's not doing business with you, and having a deliberate approach as a business owner or a sales leader to contact those people and say, look, out of interest, look, I've noticed you've dropped off the radar. You know, what would you have changed from the way that we've worked with you that would have mean that you would have proceeded further and done business with you? Or what was it that made you choose a competitor over us? So start to understand why people aren't doing business with you, but you can't understand that if you're not actually tracking the people that are dropping off the radar or not proceeding or making an inquiry and then going no further. The number of businesses that I've done work with where they get people ringing in and they don't ever proceed to business, and I'm sitting there going, what are you guys saying on the phone? So you need to start observing what people are saying on the phone. So if you've got people ringing in and their clients aren't proceeding or going any further, you need to start listening to what people are saying on the phone. And observation is a key factor in improving performance, because there might be a simple phrase, a simple word, not creating some commitment or follow through on the call. So what I'll do next is give you a call next Wednesday to see how you're feeling about it. There could be fundamentally some simple things that are going wrong in those inbound calls that could change the game overnight, but we don't take the time to observe it and understand it or track it. So track it, one, but start observing what's going on would be the second one.
Chris, we've got another question here from Henry. Was that book from Robert, I think, Cialdini, called Weapons of Influence?
No, it's called Influence the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, Cialdini, Robert Cialdini.
Terrific. I've got another question here or should I say from Rebecca, in regards to the business development plan, asking for referrals, strategy behind that. Some of the what are some of the things behind that?
Okay, so the number one strategy is to start asking. So that's a classic case of people lacking confidence, or from an emotional reality perspective, having asked a question back in 1971 and got rejected, so therefore have a belief system that it doesn't work. So there are a number of ways that you can ask for referrals, all the way from very soft ways to very direct ways. If you want specific referral asking strategies, just jump on Google. There are thousands of them, and find some that work for you. But I'll give you some examples. So if somebody says to me at a networking function, this is a very soft way, it's an indirect way. So it's an indirect referral generation strategy. You should always be positioning referrals on the fact that you take referrals. So somebody says to me, Chris, how's business going? Going incredibly busy at the moment. Just getting so many referrals from my clients who've got fellow business owners who just aren't getting the results they deserve. So yeah, things are really great. How's business going for you? So I'm actually indirectly positioning the fact that I get referrals. Actually contracting with clients, and I just did a presentation to some account executives for Salesforce over in Manhattan in New York, and that, you know, Salesforce is the number one CRM and collaboration tool in the world. And these guys, they're real go-getters, Manhattan, New York, and they typically get small chunks of a client's business. And one of the biggest issues they have is they get 6 months down the track and they go, now how do we go and ask them for more of the business or to refer us through to other parts of the business or other parts of the organisation or other distribution points? So you need to take it back in contract with people. So when you get on a small piece of business, and I'm working with, you know, stockbrokers, whatever, you say, look, you know, really appreciate the fact that you've given me part of your business to look after. What I'd really like to know is, in 6 months' time, what would we need to have achieved together in our relationship in order for you to refer me onto other parts of the business or to have more of your business, and get them to tell you. Then it's very clear. Then in 6 months' time you say, hey, look, John, you might recall 6 months ago we talked about the fact that I had a small part of your business. I'd really like your input into how you feel that, you know, we've gone against the things that we wanted to achieve together. Get them to tell you. They go, well, that's great. So one of the things we talked about was that if we were to achieve those things, that you'd be prepared to refer me on to other parts of the business. How do you think we should go about that? What would you suggest? So it's like a reverse close. You know, how can I make it easier for you to refer me to people? How do you think we should go about you introducing me to other parts of the business? John, we talked about this. As you know, referrals are a really important part of my business, and majority of my business comes from referrals. I'd really like to set up a meeting with you to talk about who you may know that would be similar to you, because you're the type of client I love working with. Can we have a meeting to talk about who you might know that we can have a conversation that you can introduce me to, and the best way to go about that? So look, I could talk about referral strategies all day. There are thousands of ways of doing it, and you need to embed it as every single part of your business from the moment you establish a client, all the way through to your reviews, all the way through to your networking. If you're going to go to a networking function, take your best client, sit there and say, hey, look, I would really appreciate it if you could act as an advocate for me today when we're talking to potential customers. That's a referral generation strategy, because your best client is going to be along saying, oh yeah, I've been doing business with Chris for quite some time. You guys should talk. That's that social proof, that testimonial, that direct reference. So it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you are receiving referrals reactively, then you are missing out on referrals proactively, and you just need to start asking.
All right, Chris, we've got time for one more question from Natalie. What books, training would you recommend for people who used to be confident and engaging? Mm-hmm. They have to be because of bad experience and their confidence shattered and are now starting their own business, mm-hmm. and don't have the confidence or skill set to do the speaking, networking, relationship circuit to build their relationships and advocates.
Oh, that's a big one. Look, from my perspective, I think a really good starting point is that there is a direct link between people who are optimistic and being successful, and those people who are pessimistic. And in many cases, when people lack confidence, they attach pessimistic views to certain activities, behaviours, conversations. And what I mean by that is that there's three ways and there's a great book you could read by Martin Seligman, and it's called Learned Optimism. And Martin talks about the role that pessimism plays in holding back, people from being successful, in the way that you personalise, a certain outcome occurs, you personalise it in a pessimistic way. There's a pervasiveness concept to it as well. So you believe that that's going to touch everything, and that, if I have that conversation, everyone's going to react that way, and there's a permanence to it, and it's always going to be that way. So one of the starting points is teaching yourself to attach optimistic meanings to certain outcomes or things that you're looking at doing, and being optimistic fundamentally changes the game. So there's no research that suggests that extroverts are more successful than introverts, or introverts are more successful than extroverts, but absolutely people who are optimistic will be more successful. So you need to look at yourself and say, do I attach optimistic meanings to certain things, or am I more pessimistic about the way I attach meanings to it? That's a starting point I focus on with a lot of people. I've got a very, very confident client at the moment who, if somebody doesn't ring him back, he thinks that they're rude, they don't want to talk to him, they're never going to get back to him. And I'm very clear as saying, mate, that's actually holding you back. When a client doesn't get back to me, I just believe they're busy. I absolutely believe they want to talk to me. I absolutely believe that they're going to talk to me, and I absolutely believe that they're just busy. That's the why they're not talking to me, which changes the way that you then follow through. It changes the way that you leave a voicemail. It changes the way that you structure your next email. It changes the game. If you attach pessimistic views to it, it means that you start to, that the way that you write to them, the way that you leave your voicemails, the way that you actually follow them up at all changes. So I would start with Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman, and start to train yourself to attach optimistic meaning to what you need to do, what you're capable of, what outcomes you believe you can achieve, etc. That's a really good book to read. It's a really easy book to read too.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. Well, that's all the questions we have time for today. On behalf of CCIQ, I'd like to thank Chris for taking the time to present today. Very impressive, Chris. I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us for today's session. Don't forget that CCIQ have a range of webinars and events coming up. Next webinar, can a narcissistic leader actually be of strategic benefit, on the 5th of October? And Safe Business is Good Business. It's on the 11th of October. If you want to find out more about upcoming webinars, go to the CCIQ events page to book your place. Thanks for joining us today and look forward to welcoming you to another CCIQ webinar in the near future.